As the Attorney General, I'm going to take a couple of privileges here. I want to first note that we have former Attorney General Benjamin Civiletti here with us today. He was one of my first bosses when I joined the Justice Department. Welcome back, Mr. Attorney General. And I think I'd also like to ask all the members of the Kennedy family to please stand so that we can recognize you all. There are a lot of them, aren't there? I want to thank each of our panelists for sharing their insights and remarkable experience with us today. Now, it's my honor to turn the program over to Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, the first of Robert and Ethel Kennedy's 11 children, the 66th Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, an alumna of the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs, and a dear friend. Like her father and like so many in her family, Kathleen's life and career have been defined by a commitment to public service. And we are honored that she has returned to the department today to help us honor her father and to speak on behalf of her family. So please join me in welcoming Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for welcoming us all here, including so many members of our family. You are a brave man. And can I mention two other people who I think are very special here? Secretary Cohen and his wonderful wife, Janet, have joined us. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And my own Attorney General from the state of Maryland, Doug Gansler. So thank you for coming as well. This has been an amazing week. There have been many joys, and there's been much sadness as well. As you've all heard, my uncle, Sarge Shriver, died this week. He had led a life of devoted service. He accomplished so much with the Peace Corps and the War on Poverty and his work with Special Olympics. His support for his wife, which as a wife I'm always big on men who help you, so I love that about Sarge. And also what I loved about the Shrivers, what I do love about them is what an extraordinary family they are and how the children help one another. And so I just want to say on behalf of our family how much we'll miss Sarge. The other person who died this week was Angie Novello, who was my father's secretary from the youngest. I can't remember life without Angie. And I remember she used to, she was very devoted to him. She would come over to our house on Sundays and take dictation, and that's when you had to do, shorthand. I couldn't understand what she could possibly understand from her scribbles. But she always said, "Yes, Bob," with a very wonderful smile and a very great sense of calmness, and really helped him so much. Her brother-in-law was Carmine Bellino, who was this great accountant and who could figure out where the money went and who profited. And because of his help, my father was able to go after many people in organized crime. So that's the sadness of this week. There's been a lot of joy as well, which is that our family has gotten together. Caroline and Ed did a wonderful job yesterday in celebrating President Kennedy's administration and his extraordinary inaugural address. We're here with my aunt and godmother, Jean Smith, who I have to say brought peace to Ireland. And of course, it makes me remember her wonderful husband, Steve Smith, who was a great friend of all of ours. Vicki is with us and has, as was said yesterday, helped so much Teddy be the person he could be. So thank you very much for that, Vicki, and for your family. And there are lots of other brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, and if I mention all of them, I will be here forever. So I'm moving on, but it's good to be here with all my cousins, and I think there are a few Lawfords as well. It's good to be back at the Justice Department. I often visited here with my brothers and sisters when I was young, and I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to work here under Janet Reno. We came here as children because our father wanted us to know what was going on, what challenges he was facing, whether with Ross Barnett or George Wallace or even J. Edgar Hoover, which I'll get to in a minute. We came to the Attorney General's office, which is now a conference room. But he chose it as an office, the largest room probably in this building almost, because he liked to work collaboratively. You could see from the pictures that there were always lots of people in the room, because he liked to listen and hear what everybody had to say. And when we came here, we often came for dinner. We played with Broomis, our large drooling Newfoundland, and we tossed footballs. And we often saw how many of our pictures are watercolors Daddy had put up against the wall. As you know, it is a large room, and it had tall ceilings and marvelous WPA murals at either end. And even in the midst of the activity at the lower level, I always found myself drawn to those murals of muscular men and women walking together up a hill, always striving forward, the work for justice as a continual and constant challenge. That challenge, the work of taking on difficult and intractable questions, excited my father. He wanted to be better and to do better. Every night around our parents' bed, we would pray that he would be the best Attorney General ever. Can I have some water? Can I have some water? Somebody? Can you grab any? Anyway, thank you, Mr. Attorney General. It's very kind of you. I first saw his dedication to justice even before he was the Attorney General. He was then the counsel to the Senate Racket Committees, where he was investigating corruption. When other mothers were taking their children to the playground to make castles in the sandbox, to ride on the seesaw, to climb the jungle gym, my mother brought my brothers and I to the Senate Racket Committee hearings. Some of my first words were, "I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may tend to incriminate me." That was probably a useful phrase for a 4-year-old. But my father was able to see that organized crime was closing its eyes on us, infiltrating unions that should have been defending working men and women, taking over what was once legitimate businesses. He said, either we're going to be successful or they will own the country. Looking back after 50 years, it's hard to grasp the respect and deference that J. Edgar Hoover commanded in government and to the nation at large. However, Hoover said there was no such thing as organized crime. But my father wouldn't be intimidated by conventional wisdom or by the mob. And his efforts led Congress to pass a law on organized crime and to authorize the federal government to prosecute the thugs who would rob, intimidate, and kill their fellow citizens. The thugs weren't happy. They threatened my brothers and sisters and myself. They threatened to throw acid in our eyes. And when we were at Our Lady of Victory parochial school, while the other children could leave at the final bell, we often went up to the principal's office to wait for my mother to come and pick us up to make sure that we were safe. As you know, once my father became Attorney General, his attention increasingly turned, as we heard today, to civil rights. During the freedom rides of 1961, civil rights activists were met by white mobs and Klansmen with lead pipes, baseball bats, and chains. Just another part of the Greyhound bus driver story. At one point, as you heard from John Lewis, the bus drivers were so frightened that they refused to drive. Their riders could have been called off. My father called up a Greyhound supervisor demanding that they get someone, anyone, to drive the buses. "The government is going to be very upset if this group doesn't get to continue that trip," he said. "Somebody better get in that damn bus and get these people on the way." He also mentioned that the Greyhound's license to operate was up before the Interstate Commerce Commission. Greyhound found a driver. In 1963, Charlene Hunter became the first African American to graduate from the University of Georgia. And at that time, and she said it eloquently, and this is why I thought of it today, that the United States could only win the Cold War by living up to the promise of equality and freedom for its citizens. He knew that it wasn't enough to mouth principles. We had to get results. I still have a letter that my father wrote me on June 11th, 1963, at 4:45 p.m. It says, "Dear Kathleen, we are in the midst of registering 2 Negroes at the University of Alabama, despite the opposition of Governor Wallace. I hope by the time you get to college, these problems will be far behind us. Love to you, Daddy." One of those students, as we heard, was Vivian Malone, whose sister, Dr. Sharon Malone, is here with us today and with her family, and once again, good going on a choice of a wife. My father worked hard to get the 1964 Civil Rights Act passed, and he was pleased that Burke Marshall figured out that it should come under the Commerce Clause. In 1968, my father predicted that in 40 years, the United States would elect an African American president. He would be thrilled not only that Barack Obama won, but he is now fearlessly tackling the toughest challenges, beginning with the near collapse of our economy, moving on to health care, and nuclear arms control. Like President Obama, my father also understood that justice is not simply about passing laws or enforcing them, but also about creating a country that is just, a country that acts fairly and equitably, that understands that some children are born fortunate and others not. He said, "For there is another kind of violence, slower but just as deadly as the shot or the bomb in the night. This is the violence of faceless institutions, of indifference and inaction, what Robert Frost called the slow, smokeless burning of decay. This is the violence that afflicts the poor, that poisons relations between men because their skin has different colors. This is the slow destruction of a child by hunger, and schools without books and homes without heat in the winter." My father knew that we who are fortunate have a responsibility to open our hearts and our minds to those who are plagued by poverty or poor health or broken families or inadequate education. And so he launched the Juvenile Justice Initiatives to create opportunities for children who didn't have that access. And out of these efforts grew the Poverty Program and eventually the Office of Justice Programs, where I was fortunate enough to work under Janet Reno. She created the Comprehensive Communities efforts that brought together education, HHS, HUD, and Justice Department to help build safe, vibrant, and healthy communities. When I became Lieutenant Governor, I took that example to Maryland, and we were able to reduce crime in our most violent neighborhoods by 35% in 3 years. I was also privileged to work with Janet Reno on the federal assault weapons ban. If that statute were still in place, the Tucson shooter would not have had such an easy access to the guns or easy ability to keep running his deadly errands. I believe that this department and this country has got to do a better job on gun regulation and on gun control and making our citizens safe. As my father said, we glorify killing on movie and television screens and call it entertainment. We make it easy for men of all shades of sanity to acquire weapons, and violence breeds violence. Repression brings retaliation, and only a cleaning of our whole society can remove this sickness from our soul. After my uncle, John Kennedy, was killed, my father was devastated. He stayed on for justice for a time, but his heart was broken. All that he had worked for seemed torn apart. J. Edgar Hoover regained his ascendancy and stopped the work on organized crime. And so while the work of justice continued, the spirit that had animated it was surely weakened. At that time, my father loved to walk. In fact, he had always taken our family on walks in the neighborhood. We often ended up at Archibald Cox's house, who wasn't really sure what to do with the Attorney General, his wife, 7 kids, and 4 dogs. One thing he did know to do was not to invite us in. My father also loved Shakespeare. Growing up, my room was next to his bathroom, and every morning he would do his sit-ups while listening to Shakespeare records. One evening, he asked me to walk with him and recited the passage from Henry V. "From this day to the ending of the world, we shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother." Those words capture the camaraderie and purpose that animated the Kennedy administration and this Justice Department. My father saw that spirit because, along with his brother Jack, he helped to create it. The band of brothers at Justice applied themselves tirelessly and courageously to the great moral questions of our nation and helped African Americans secure their civil rights. Many of us here today, were not part of that band of brothers. We may wish that we had participated in that heroic work. But I think that my father would say that every generation has its own challenges and its own need for heroism. He was a great Attorney General because he saw injustice that to others had been invisible, and he called on his team at the department and then at the nation at large to see it and address it. All of you, Mr. Attorney General, are involved in important and critical questions in this day, at this time. As you make your climb up that hill towards a just, peaceful, and equitable America, thank you for remembering my father's legacy.
Thank you, Kathleen, for those wonderful words, and I think that is a very fitting way for us to end the commemoration, this tribute to our nation's greatest Attorney General. I would now like to invite all of you to join us on the 5th floor, where we're going to have a reception. I'd like to say in my office, but it is not truly my office. It is his office. He only lets me borrow it. And so please join us upstairs on the 5th floor, and we will continue this celebration of Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Thank you.
100 years ago today, in a nation torn by fraternal strife, Abraham Lincoln proclaimed that all persons held as